Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's nice to see everyone here. We are going to open the meeting for the Nevada Irrigation District Board of Directors for April the 10th. And we do have Director Johansson, who will be attending via Zoom, I am told. And for the rest of us, if we could all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Division 1?
That's me. Yes, here.
Division 2?
Here.
Division 3? Here. Division 4?
Here.
And Division 5, Scott was attending via Zoom as a member of the public. Is that correct? Yes.
Yeah, if I may, Vice President Eck, Director Johansson, you do, as I understand it, have the option to participate as a board member under the Just Cause exception. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. You can participate just as a member of the public, but you would not be able to vote on any of the items of business. So if you would like to invoke the Just Cause, just let me know and we can take care of that now.
Yeah, I'll be here as a member of the audience, not as a director.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 2. This is for public comment for any item not on the agenda. So if there's anyone that would like to speak, please come forward, and you have 3 minutes.
My name's Al Wolf. I worked for SMUD for 39 years. Sam Vitus, one of the early ditch tenders around our area, used to educate my brother and I on our ranch out in the Mount Vernon district about water conservation. I spent a lot of time in the Far East during the Vietnam War, and I met an Ifugao headhunter. He was selling weapons to the Marines on the pier in Subic Bay because their M14 rifles were having some problems. So he's selling backup weapons to them. And I talked to him for quite a while in this broken English and found out that they had been saving water for over 2,000 years by building terraces. And they not only saved water, but they saved soil. And I tell you, those guys really knew what they were doing. And I saw terraces when I went to Kaohsiung in Taiwan and also in Japan. I went out in the fields, you know, having been brought up on a fruit ranch outside of Auburn. We had 200 acres out there. And we were very conscious on water quality and so on. In fact, my last shift, the Enterprise, when we used to, water quality, it was, for our reactors, was 2 parts per billion. Couldn't even taste the water. But it was a demand that the reactors, the 8 reactors on the Enterprise, needed that purity to prevent crud, corrosion products, from being created between the fuel pins in the fuel assemblies and would cause overheating. But and I also read an article on Tibet where they built loose dams that were porous on all their water courses in the mountains to save water and slow down the water so it would percolate into the soil slower than just running down the mountains. These are the ways we could, save water around here, which is not done. I mean, nobody terraces their land around here, unfortunately. But I believe that is a way of saving water big time rather than building more dams. My brother was the soil engineer on the French Meadows and Hellhole dams for the Placer County Water Agency, also the diversion dam at Auburn. And of course, he was very sad when they tore that down. But he told me that, it takes a lot of energy to build dams. And, it doesn't take that much energy to build terraces and that. So, these Ifugao headhunters in the Philippines and other terracing that I saw in the other countries and that, it makes a lot of sense. And I think we ought to move into doing that kind of thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolf. Is there someone else who wants to speak about anything not on the agenda? Please state your name for the record.
Matthew Coulter, Nevada County. Access. We use our NID dishes for your NID access for a lot of different things. And we're losing access as time goes on, as new people move up, new gates go in, new fences go in. My mother and our next door neighbor took this to the California Appeals Court back in the 80s. Continuous use of trails and roads and paths for public use is allowed. I would like NID to utilize the law and open up our access to our ditches so the bicycles, pedestrians can stay off the roads and survive. I walked here from Memorial Park, pushed my bicycle, talked with the crossing guard out front, and she can't even believe what's happening. She can't believe that people that she's trying to cross the road are being killed. People are so reckless. Put in a sign down the street. I bring up these traffic issues because NID plays an integral role in our recreation, our movement through the entire community, not just of water, but of people too. Get to certain trailheads, and they're advertised as such. They're heavily, heavily used, the ones that are posted. Because of that, the water gets impacted too. I brought up Wolf Creek to you guys multiple times, as well as Deer Creek, but let's talk about Wolf Creek. We use it for transit from the lower Banner ditch through town, and then you pick it up again at the tar ditch below town, below the sewage treatment plant. Nobody seems to care about that piece of Wolf Creek that you guys are using to transit and sell water. With the sewage is being dumped, the trash, the homeless camps, the fire non-mitigation right up to the edge of the creek. So all this old mining waste is going into the creek, you're capturing it again, and then you're selling it. I don't get it. I don't get how I can walk up the street and see this brand new housing development right here, Gilded Springs, with all that mud runoff that runs almost to Alpha Street before the hill goes up. We're being so blatant with our waste of water locally here that I take video of people washing off their sidewalks with the hose, and I call them out on it. And like, okay, we won't do that anymore. Didn't post it, but that's how I feel about it, that when I see someone corner to corner of their property, huge lot, out there with the hose, hosing it down during the drought, and you guys wouldn't do anything about it. I'm highly skeptical anything will happen from this, and we'll get to an emergency situation, we'll see trucks rolling into town with water, and people will be lined up with jugs. Feel like we're in Gaza, but we're not getting bombed, right? We're just lining up for water. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else like to speak? Okay, we'll close that part of the public comment for items not on the agenda. Next, we'll move to our consent agenda. Directors, do we have any comments on anything on consent?
3D,
Okay.
and then I would move to the consent agenda items 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3E.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a first and second to approve. Can we call the vote, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Any public comment on that? I forget that part sometimes. Any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, can we have a vote?
Division 2,
Aye.
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1.
Yes. Okay, so now we'll go to item 3D, and Karen, would you like to
Sure.
start us out with that?
So, I just have a couple of comments on page 8, paragraph E, under the sole source. It says that the sole source contracts may also be awarded to consultants that have a high level of knowledge of the district's infrastructure, operations, and regulatory requirements. So I would like to see that. To me, high level of knowledge of the district is not really the criteria. It should be experience working with the district, or at least have it and experience working with the district, because I think a lot of community businesses do have a high degree of knowledge of the district. So it's not a very high bar. And to me, I look to hydro In particular, they have contracts that, give a contractor or consulting company a depth of experience with that operation, and that is the criteria, not just knowing about the district. So to me, that would be more clear. So I just put the language to be added would be and experience working with the district.
Before we move on, are all the directors okay with that?
I'm fine.
Good.
All
I'm
right,
fine. I'm
we can
fine
add
with
that
that.
in then.
Okay, is there any comment about that from the public? Seeing none.
Director Hull, did you have a second item?
On page 11, it says, the district will award the contract to the lowest responsive bidder or other criteria will be set forth in the invitation to bid. So I get that you want to have perhaps a broader criteria, but that lowest bidder is a really important driver in the selection. So I wondered, can we say and there instead of or? Because then the lowest bidder criteria becomes not part of the selection criteria, potentially.
I can see what you're saying. So instead of, what if we propose to modify or to and?
Yeah, that would be great. And there's a second reference to that under D below. So there's, in the second paragraph is one.
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
So those are just my comments.
Are the other directors agreeable?
Okay, great. Do we need a vote for approval? We do as amended.
You need a motion approved as amended.
Okay, may we have a motion for that, please?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve item 3D with the amendments discussed in the board meeting and agreed to.
And that was three amendments, and I can read them back very quickly. It was in section 3080.8, sub-item E. It was adding the second to last sentence, it'll now read, sole source contracts may also be awarded to consultants that have a high level of knowledge and experience working with the district's infrastructure, operations, or regulatory requirements. The second modification is in paragraph, section 3080.12, last paragraph of the section. And it's the second sentence in the paragraph, whether the district will award the contract to the lowest bidder and other criteria will be set forth in the invitation to bid. And then that same modification is included in 3080.13 subparagraph.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Or you were the second, is that correct?
I'll second.
Oh, I thought you did already.
No,
Okay.
not yet.
Boy, I'm gonna have to I know, I'm rusty, that's right, sorry, everyone. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment to this procurement policy changes? Okay, thank you. Seeing none, please call for the vote.
Division 2,
Aye.
Aye.
Division 4,
Aye.
Division 1.
Yes, thank you. Okay, that completes the consent agenda. Now we'll go to general orders. The first would be item 4A, and are you going to take this, Jennifer? Resolution and contract approval on master planning to adopt an authorizing a budget amendment of $105,000 for consulting services and approve a contract in the amount of $393,961 to HDR Engineering for the development of the district's information technology operational technology master.
Mr. Jones is going to handle this.
Okay.
Morning, Board, members of the public. I'm Greg Jones. I'm the Assistant General Manager. Joined with me up here with John Ortiz. He's our IT Administrator. And on the call, we have various principals and staff of HDR, which we are requesting for a contract to be awarded. I believe we have Elizabeth Dawson on the line, Randy Olden, Brendan Ernst, David Beerley, and Kier Sa. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. So I'm going to go through our staff report real briefly. Thank you, Director Heck, for reading the whole recommendation prior to the start of the
Well,
item.
I like doing that for the folks that are out here that may not be following.
I appreciate it. So we are here today to seek authorization for, number one, a budget amendment, which is listed in the resolution of $105,000, as well as the approval of a contract in the total amount of $393,961 to HDR for the development of what we are calling the Information Technology / Operational Technology Master Plan for the district. So, as you may be aware, over the last 30 years, technology has formed a key cornerstone in all business activities and life throughout not only NID, but throughout the world. We have been a kind of a legacy player in keeping up with our technology here at the district. If some of you haven't recognized that over the years, we're slowly building that back in. We are recognizing that there are more and more interactions, there are more and more cross opportunities for information technology, operational technology with our information systems, with our operations, with our hydroelectric systems. And we really did need to come together to build a master plan that helps us lay out a framework and a 10-year plan, a short-term, mid-term, and long-term plan to integrate capabilities, staffing, resources, and capital improvements within our system to keep up, keep pace, and really get ahead of the issues that continue to come forward with on a daily basis between our operations and our information technology sectors. So that's sort of the brainchild of how this was formed. It was an opportunity that we brought forth key members of staff from our hydroelectric operations and information systems to come together to form a request for proposal. That request for proposal was sent out on December 5th of last year to roughly about 12 different consultants whom we gathered within all departments and thought about, geez, who out there could help us with this particular action? We sent it to 12 prospective consulting firms on December 5th. Around January 10th, we had a question and answer format for any of those prospective firms that were thinking about applying and putting in an application or a proposal that was technically going to be due at the beginning of February. And so the request amongst those proposals or those proponents who were on the Teams call was that, hey, can we have a little more time? We went through the holidays, so we offered a little more time, a little more information, and a little more understanding of the proposal that NID was seeking to get out of this. So we had a great conversation online around the 10th of January. We moved the deadline for the proposals out to March 5th. So we gave the proponents another month time, which was okay. And so we then in March 5th, we received proposals from 5 different firms. Part of the request on the 10th of January was that these firms who are doing the proposals wanted to actually come in and give a presentation to NID and to our staff. So kind of moving it from a 2-dimensional document to more of a 3-dimensional interaction and conversation with staff to really get an understanding of the framework that these firms had put together for us and sort of how it ties with NID's needs. At that presentation, there was one of those 5 firms that actually just dropped out. They put the proposal together a few days prior or the month prior, but then when it came down to coming and giving a presentation, they dropped out. So we had 4 firms come to the office here, one virtually, 3 of them in person. And they gave formal presentations to 7 NID staff. So we had a panel of 7 staff representing hydroelectric, information technology, and operations, and administration as well. So those presentations went, we had a unanimous ranking amongst those 7 staff of the number 1 choice. You can see the list here on the second page of the staff report of the 4 firms giving us a proposal, their cost, and just as you had mentioned on the procurement, lowest bid, happened to win out on this one, but it wasn't necessarily the lowest bid was the final straw. It was the quality of the proposal. It was the quality of the interaction that we had on that day for the in-person presentations, and the sense of we're going to get a really good product in another 12 to 18 months from now with HDR. So the three elements that are being developed here that we anticipate, the first is an audit and evaluation of NID. Who are we? How do we interact? What is our staffing capability? What are our skill sets? What are our job descriptions? How do we interact and manage our IT and our OT systems? So it's really a dissection of NID, IT and OT systems and our networks combined. They're going to lead some workshops internally with staff, and we're going to discuss that so that we all get a really clear sense of how we operate currently in today's environment, what we have. The next is HDR is going to come with a set of recommendations, best practices from other similar and like-minded organizations as ours. Give us some best practices. Again, we're going to sit down with a series of workshops with them and talk about what are those best practices and how can they interact with NID? What's our culture? How can we utilize some of those best practices? How can we just, we're not going to go after certain practices because of our culture, our systems, our size, our complexities, all these other things that we have in mind. Finally, we're going to develop this 1 to 3 sort of short-term, mid-term, and long-term plan. Again, this is all going to be identified as interactive with NID staff. We anticipate our consultants at HDR are going to take our recommendations, listen to our concerns and our thoughts, and help build a plan that is tailored to NID for short, mid, and long term, and that we can move back and amend it as we go, and we'll work on that, and especially with financial considerations as well. HDR gave us a suite of optional services that we did not include in the request for proposal, and it's stuff that they identified as sort of 6 or 7 different sub opportunities that we should probably look at as we move forward. The request to approve the full $393,961 is inclusive of all those additional options. We still have yet to meet with HDR as a kickoff meeting, and our intention is to go through these 6 different options specifically and really get an understanding, detailed understanding of what those options mean to us. So what we're asking for today is the full breadth of the potential of whether or not staff, we want to interact with all of these particular options. And if we don't, then the contract would be somewhat less than the $393. But in looking at it and just understanding through their proposal, the short definitions that they've given and some of the conversation that we've had during that presentation, we feel pretty strongly that we're gonna want to engage in most of, if not all, of the options presented with HDR. Let's see. With that, we are requesting a budget amendment into Fund 70 for $105,000. We had budgeted $150,000 this year for this action. Again, really not understanding the full breadth of the costs. At the time, it was, it was not a placeholder, but it was a sum of money that we thought would be generally appropriate. Looking at the schedule and the timeline, it's pretty aggressive to get this all done in a year's time. But we do think that we're going to put some real effort and get this through in a 12-month period. So that's where we've added. We'd like to add another $105,000 to this year's 2024 budget to get us through to the remainder of the contract. We anticipate will be taken up in 2025, and we'll be budgeting for that. So the staff report entails the actual request for proposal that we presented to these 12 firms, a small excerpt of the HDR proposal, which is mostly just the scope, didn't need to include all resumes, et cetera, for you in this one. Timeline and the resolution for this request. So I think, John, is there anything that you want to add?
No, you did a great
Missed
job.
out?
Nothing to it.
Okay.
Use that.
Okay, so I guess if you have questions, we also, like I say, we have members of the HDR team that are dedicated to this project, and they're online. And thank you all for being online and being part of the conversation. So if you have any technical questions, any scheduling questions, specific to the proposal, they're here to help answer that. Or any other questions of myself, John, Kian, and Chip were also integral in building this request for proposal and moving forward on the choice of HDR as our contract.
Thank you. So at this time, we'll take questions from board members.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment about, surprised to see that HDR does this kind of work, given our long history with them and all the other stuff they do. So that's kind of exciting, plus, I think. So.
Sure.
I have some comments and questions. One is, I really appreciate the approach you're taking. I think so much money is wasted in technology projects because it's not an integrated plan to begin with. So I really commend that. I think this is a critical investment area for the district. I would harken back to our strategic planning sessions in which at one of my table groups, the staff there commented about how disjointed the current technology infrastructure is and the amount of wasted time and effort by the staff in how they have to implement their work. So I think this effort will really help to get an approach that eliminates that. So one question I have, in the proposal, it talks about, or the staff report talks about efficiency improvements. And I'm wondering if we can also have as a component just the reduction in operational costs, because ultimately technology isn't just about information, it's about efficiency and how we drive operating costs down through technology, use of technology. So I just raised that. We put a huge amount of investment and effort into our enterprise financial system, and I'm sure that's integrated in here, but I didn't see it being called out as we've got a backbone system that we are committed to, and how we would build around that system as opposed to throw it out the door, which I've seen organizationally. The state is famous for this. Things have changed and we just threw away millions of dollars. So I just want to make sure that that financial system, the effort that's been put into that is, and I'm sure you have that in mind.
Well, if you want me to comment on that.
Sure.
I think that's a direct relationship to task number 1 into task number 2. Task number 1 being, what is your current system? What are you currently operating in? What are the software platforms that you're invested in, that you're working towards, you have implemented, you're about to implement, you're working to implement, you spend money to implement. So that's task 1, is to really get a breadth of all that. Task 2 is to really understand how those current systems, those legacy systems, would be amended, adjusted, kept, augmented, or built upon. So we will be discussing specifically the ERP program and really looking at that because it is such an integral part of our whole information system, right? So yes, we anticipate that's going to be at least looked at. It carries sort of, this request is really a lot of kind of the operational side of our technology basis. So everything that Hydro and Ops are doing in the field, from gauges to SCADA. But IT is definitely overseen in a lot of the ERP processes, so we will be identifying those as an example. So I hope that helps.
Yep, that's perfect. And I'm wondering, I assumed that we had an original project cost for this, and how does the 393 fit into that original project cost that the district had set aside for this effort?
Well, in '24, we've budgeted for $150,000. So that's where, when the numbers came back, they were definitely higher in total than what we budgeted for this year, or even maybe expected, the grand scheme of the project.
Okay.
Right? So this was something we've never necessarily done before here at the district. It was sort of we need to understand what the market's going to bear for us. And these 4 costs were what the market bared, and you can see the wide price difference. However, the price difference between the 3, between HDR, West Yost, and Launch, were really not all that far off, particularly West Yost and HDR. You know, that's a matter of 6 to 7, 8% off. And so we think that the total cost of the product is in line with market and what it should bear. We were just, when we first initially thought of this last year as we were developing the budget for 2024, I think we shot a little low in this year's budget. That's why we're coming back with an amendment to bring that back up to speed.
Sorry, it just pertains to what you asked. What's the number without the 6 options, 6 optional?
Quite a bit lower. Those 6 options, do you recall what that was?
No, I don't. Does it fit into the 150?
It doesn't.
Above 150?
It's above 150, yeah. The 6 options would add about around.
I think it's 207.
207?
207.
All of them combined, yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine. Well, I mean, I do think this is such an important investment area, and as you say, we didn't really have the experience to know what something like this costs in the market.
Right. That is correct.
Well, that's all I have to say. I just do want to reinforce what the proposal says here very clearly is the importance of integrating staff in the discussions, and so I really appreciate that. Too many systems are developed without the people who use the systems, and then it's like, what yo-yo created that? So this is clearly emphasizes that the people who use the system are going to have a say in what is kind of designed as the overall plan. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, Trevor?
Yeah, I get a few things. So, as you know, I'm always partial to putting technology into everything, but I'm also super skeptical about consultants. My experience is that you do not get the return on investment as you would if you had the internal expertise, mainly because they lack the understanding of your day-to-day operations, your existing systems, and there's no one there when the contract ends, and you end up in an ongoing support contract or something like that. So that's kind of where my questions are coming from. I'm not saying that it can't be done, but I'm always skeptical. If it's done right, you'd probably be okay. Does HDR sell software that is similar to the systems that they will be looking at that we already deployed?
Not sure they
No.
sell software.
They don't develop our software.
They don't have their own software offering.
Platform, I don't think
Well,
that's.
that's good, because a lot of times these consultants come in and they just want to swap, right?
You're right.
So then I'd rather not pay them. If they want to come make a pitch, I wouldn't want to pay them consulting fees to do that. Okay, so that's helpful. The second question I had, you mentioned it a little bit in your talk of that they have experience in similar companies like our water district here?
Yes, yes.
Yes, they have, in their proposal, they did present other agencies that they've done this for. So, I mean, that was part of the reason why we chose them or we looked at them. Also, too, the presentation that they gave on site was, I mean, they knocked it out of the park. And I do feel like what you said though with consultants, I feel the same way.
You would rather have a body, a head count than do consulting, for somebody running your Office 360, right? You'd rather have them here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where that comes from.
But, I mean, my experience with consultants, so you have to work with them and you have to partner with them. This isn't just consultants coming here and say, okay, you're gonna sit in the corner and do your thing. No, we partner with them. I think all of us are gonna partner with this, and we're gonna work on a plan together versus, like I said, just them coming in here.
Yeah, and I agree that's the only way it works. You're only gonna get what you extract out of it.
And that's my experience as well.
And by the way, I don't know if Elizabeth is out there or Randy, that was very clearly intended with the presentation and throughout their proposal.
Yeah, the proposal
This was a unique match that we're gonna work together.
So then, yeah, go ahead.
So back to the other companies they've worked with, do we do, as a matter of course, do reference conversations with those companies to ensure that some of the concerns that Trevor's mentioned are, have been, you know, that it's a good relationship, a good deliverable?
We did not do that. Not do that.
Okay.
We based our decision on came here on site and gave us the presentation and then you can, I mean, I got the feeling that they are very experienced and know what they're doing.
That might be the case. I'm sure it is the case with HDR. It just, sometimes what I've found is there can be hiccups in other people's processes, you know, contracting processes that we learn from. And so, for instance, a question to those other companies might be, was there any part of the process that you had troubles with that we could learn from in our relationship with the consultant moving forward? So not so much to deter you from selecting them, but to learn from that experience so that we can avoid that.
That's a great point. And we definitely will follow up with the references that are within this proposal with them. I doubtful if I want to change our recommendation here today, but I think it is a good opportunity to reach out to those executives of the other organizations that they have worked with to understand a little bit more of what should have worked better, what could have worked better.
Yeah. Just a learning lesson.
That's a really good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. So we addressed the monetary item in Karen's questioning. So personally, I feel comfortable with the 207. I would prefer to do that and have you come back with the options after you've been exposed to them and decide, hey, these are valuable or not, especially in the climate that we're in fiscally. So that would be my suggestion to the board, is that we authorize the 207. Also, make myself available, you know, as a attendee for these conversations if you like. Just let me know if you need me in meetings, and I'm more than happy to hear what they have to say and might be able to add some questions that you might want to ask. Make sure that we get the most out of it. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if you guys feel the whole amount is easier, better. I would just rather the staff see what the 6 items are and if they're pertinent or not.
Have any insight or analyzed each one? There were 6?
Yeah, there's 6 options.
The entail, and I'm sort of like with Trevor on that one too. Sounds like a good idea. Yeah. And which do we do, the chicken or the egg first, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's unreasonable. specifically in the spirit of the previous request of the board, this item was to be more actively involved. So I think it's fine, just glancing through the options, not being overly familiar with them. Option 2 and 3 seem like really good options. Are based on security recommendations. But I don't mind the idea at all. Why don't we just propose to go forward with the base contract, and then we can do some more homework, work with the consultant team, and then come back and have a more thorough discussion about these options and maybe why they're needed. And also maybe once they kind of come in and get to understand our system more, they might want to change these options.
There might be different options.
Yeah, I agree.
You might actually get a couple of those for free.
Well, we like that.
You gotta ask the right
Put that in the record.
So we're happy to do that as well. I think the it's actually 231,707 was the total baseline cost, not 207. Misspoke.
237.
231,707
Is the baseline.
base cost.
So we'll rise our recommendation to request authorization for the baseline contract.
Correct.
Baseline costs, and we will come back at a later date with more information related to the options, and then, just note, we might modify them or.
Yep.
It should be.
I like that idea.
It should be relatively soon because, based on the Gantt chart and the proposal, we're starting to work on a couple of these tasks, by July or August. So I think we'll have a recommendation and an understanding, in the next month or so to come back with that recommendation. The comment.
Do you need to still ask for 105 for the budget amendment?
I do, because we don't have enough to fully amend that. So I think we keep with the budget amendment, and then, but the contract itself is at the 231, the full cost of the proposal minus the options. Only because that gets us through the end of the year. Otherwise, based on our new procurement process, we can't write a full contract, even at 231.
So what Greg's asking for is authorization for execution of the base contract without the options, and authorization to amend the budget in the amount requested, so we can get through this year and the base contract.
Other options would probably fall into 25, is what you're saying?
They would, or we would have to ask for another budget amendment, which is no big deal.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
I have a couple comments and questions, so if everyone will indulge me for a minute. Karen had a great comment, excuse me, about the revisions of the system to drive down our operational costs. And I did not hear a response to that, and I'm interested to know what you think about that.
That's the goal.
That is the goal, right?
Yeah.
The whole thing.
I think that's a desired outcome, but I don't think we're gonna know that until we get the result of the master plan. But that's some of the vision that we are gonna communicate with them to help us on.
Yeah.
Some of the savings would be in increased efficiencies, but some of the savings would also be in smarter future investments. We're on the border of needing to make some significant investments in technology. And we have the three systems, right? We have our overall IT system, and then we have the operating systems that operate both of the SCADA systems and water and hydro. And so we're trying to coalesce those into a system that has more synergy. So I think you would see savings or increased efficiencies, which would reduce operating costs, either in actual day-to-day work or in reduced or smarter future investments. So some of it might be a little bit difficult to quantify, but we can definitely keep that in mind and try to do that.
And as we develop the capital programs for this, this comes with a capital budgeted program as well. And so we'll look at return on investments for those investments, as well as looking at efficiencies that we can make by investing. What are the efficiencies we're going to get out of that? So it is baked into the overall, it's just maybe not as clear.
Okay. So another follow-up question. It sounds like the board is going to be in favor of the lower budgeted amount, the 231. And my question then to John is, does that slow down this process at all by having a smaller amount? It does not.
No.
We can, if we start working through this and those options still seem relevant, or maybe there's a different option, a better option, we can come back quickly. It's not a problem.
My intent is our first kickoff meeting with HDR is going to be digging deep into those options, really understanding what they mean to us. We may or may not know one or two of the options that we might not, want to do until we get other information back to us from HDR. But I would anticipate we're looking at all those options day one and really coming to an understanding of the value. Like Jennifer says, a lot of them have to do with security and vulnerabilities.
Right.
We've experienced that already at the district a few years ago, so we need to be vigilant.
And let's see, another question is, so I am not clear on what our end product is. We're going to pay eventually, it sounds like $300 and some $1,000. And what is the deliverable? What is the end product? Is it their advice on how we should change our system, or are there changes included within that $300,000? If you could tell me a little bit.
So I would like to see a 5-year business plan broken up into short, sort of 1 to 3 years, mid and long range. Within that business plan and within those segmentations of time, we've got capital investment needs, we've got resource requests, we've got job skill set development within our IT and OT systems, organizational chart needs and adjustments, changes, or information that we would have. So it's kind of a small mini business plan for the IT OT systems at the district in general. So if that helps, it should be a legitimate area you can put it on your desk and read it, plan with a budget attached to it, so that we're building
That's where I was leading, is like, so we're going to get something and then we're going to see, how much is what they're recommending cost.
For instance, we recommend NID, you have 4 people in your IT department. You need 6 people in order to get to a system-wide structure that looks like this. In the next 3 years, you need these people. Next 2 years, you need
I see. Okay.
So then it helps identify staffing resources. It helps identify capital investments, that sort of thing. That's what.
Similar to a raw water, treated water master plan, where we'll lay out a roadmap for investment moving into the future that we would then roll into the annual budgeting process.
We're talking just IT, OT, not, when you said business plan, I thought the whole.
No,
just IT technology.
just IT, OT.
My other question.
Go ahead, please.
It's on the sense, does this include software, hardware? No.
So this will guide us on investments into software,
Okay.
hardware, how to better coalesce all of the different systems, work exactly the same type of data, what will we use the data for. We do okay in technology, but we haven't made big advancements in technology.
Are we offline, Chris?
No, theirs just popped off for a second.
These did as well.
They're coming back on, but the main is still going.
The main is still.
Okay.
Thank you. Sure.
So do we, with consultants, sometimes that you get the Taj Mahal and what you need is a functioning,
We get a menu? Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do we give them any parameters around reality of our budget that,
So they're going to be working through the ITSIC, the IT Steering Committee. And so there's basically every group, including finance, is a part of that committee. So we will be providing them guidance on things that are reasonable and not reasonable. The good thing about HDR is the company overall works with us very closely on our operations in general. So it's not going to, they know who we are as a company.
Yes.
Well, and they've been working with us for a long time, many years. So they have a real integral knowledge of our operations.
And they know our struggles. They understand the obligations we have coming for us related to FERC. And so I think that kind of expertise of what the future does look like for us from an operational perspective will help them guide us to smart investments that we can actually afford and do. Because, one of the things that often happens with IT investments is you try to outsmart yourself. You buy the too big of the Cadillac, and then no one knows how to drive it. So.
And remember that the workshops built within this plan are specifically with staff who are using the systems, right? Who invariably will err on the side of caution, and gosh, that's just going to be too much for us to implement in a 3-year time period, right? And so we will look at that as we go forward.
One of the things I really appreciate is the process where you include our staff and you have the presentations, and it felt very inclusive, what I was hearing, and that's really good, instead of some consultant out here saying, okay, this is what we think you need, and then just not having sensitivities to what our limitations and what our strengths are. So thank you, John.
Yep.
Any other further board comments? Okay. Is there any comment from folks who are here or who are online?
Motion first?
Doesn't matter. Everybody does it differently. Yeah.
And day to day, we do it.
And day to day, we do it differently. Oh, it looks like we have a comment. That's okay, let's take some public comment.
I was not gonna speak. I lean with Trevor in the sense of going with the base of contract. That was what was asked for originally, was to get that information to understand how those needs were met and getting a price for that. I think the add-ons could come later would be, something that makes sense that they come on later. And also I heard that there was recommendations or, not recommendations, there was referrals for references. And I think before making a decision, fully making a decision, I think it makes sense to check the references of other public works businesses or whatever, look at it, using the same service. I think that checking the recommendations could open up the possibility of understanding the add-ons. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, Michael Taylor.
Since I took us down this road, are there any other public comment from those who are online? Okay.
So if I can just make the change, then we're looking to adopt resolution.
One moment, please. Yeah. So with that, I'm going to close public comment, and then we'll hear from staff. Thank you.
So with this slight change, we're looking to adopt resolution authorizing the budget amendment of $105,000 to fund 70 and approve the contract in the...
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yep, and to approve the contract in the amount of $231,707 to HDR Engineering.
So that would change on page 2 of the resolution.
That would change the resolution, yes.
Yeah, the only change, Board, is to resolve paragraph 2, striking $393,961 and inserting $231,707.
Right.
There's also a typo. Chris owes me a penny for the bottom. Should be April, not March.
I already got that.
Oh, yes, I see that. Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'll move that we adopt budget, resolution number 2024-12.
As amended.
As amended, to adopt a resolution authorizing a budget amendment of 105, building services, and approve a contract in the amount of $231,707 to HDR Engineering for the development of district information technology master plan, authorize the general manager to designate execute appropriate documents.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. Can we have the roll call, please?
Division 2,
Yes.
Division 3,
Aye.
4.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
We are working on bringing your silos back up. They all crashed at the same time.
They all crashed at the same time.
We agreed that you're gonna check the.
Excuse me.
We will. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll report back on that the next time we bring an item back to the board. Thank you.
Thank you,
Board.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, John.
Can.
Um,
This next item should be quick.
Help this PowerPoint.
Yeah. Due to now, the consultants.
Are we ready to move on, or do we need a break? Okay, so let's continue on with our workshop items. Item 5A, Assistant Water Superintendent Job Description, Revision for Compliance with Control Regulations.
That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
All right, good morning, board, staff, and public. I'm Chip Close, Director of Water Operations here at NID. And as you've mentioned in the title, Today, we're here to hold a workshop to get input on the changing of the job description for the Assistant Water Superintendent position, mainly to comply with cross-connection control regulations that are changing. I'll give you a very brief background on what those are. So basically, the backflow protections, that's where this stems from, came into play in 1987. The state put in regulations that said any public water system that provides water service to a parcel that has an alternate water supply or hazardous chemicals or any other hazard that has the potential to backflow into our system if we go low pressure has to have some protection in place. The district has always complied with those regulations. We have backflow devices, they're double check valves and RPs. We put these devices at the end of the meter and they protect our system. So we have done so since 1987 and things have moved on smashingly. But then in 2019, the state decided that those regulations are very old and outdated. There's new devices that are more current. And so they put to the State Water Resources Control Board an assembly bill that dictated they need to update these regulations, and they could do it through Title 17 or choose a cross-connection control policy handbook that spells out the new regulations. In January of this year, they decided they wanted to take that measure and do the cross-connection control policy handbook, which is fine. We have reviewed it, and we now know that our current regulations in Chapter 8 of NID's rules and regulations mainly follow the new regulations. We were always more stringent than the state. This puts us basically on par with the regulations, which is great. However, there is one section that is new that we don't cover, and that is that the state's new policy says that a public water system must designate at least one individual involved in the development and be responsible for the reporting, tracking, and other administration duties of its cross-connection control program. And they must also be certified as a cross-connection control specialist. We have had an individual that's been doing our backflow program, and that's what we've called it. The new terminology will now be put into place as well as the certification required. That's where the job description modifications come into play. The language in the old job description was old. It also didn't reflect the duties as described or the future duties that the new regulation will put into play. So I have taken the Assistant Water Superintendent position, we have modified some of the language, and I will apologize right off the bat. When we put these into Granicus, it drops the red lines. So you'll see on the table there that hopefully you have a version that is redlined. I can walk you through all the changes, but quite frankly, most of the changes are either language modifications to reflect the cross-connection control language standard, as well as a few modifications to better capture what the Assistant Water Superintendent is actually doing. So we took the opportunity to update the entire job description to keep it modern. The section that is of most importance to me is in the license and certification. It is on page 3 of 4, kind of 3/4 of the way down. And you'll see there the change is that we are now requiring a backflow prevention assembly tester certificate. We are also requiring a cross-connection control specialist certification. Those are the big changes at this job description. We're adding duties. We feel like the added duties and the added certification should come with compensation. So went through and we reviewed the relationship between the superintendent and the assistant superintendent in other areas such as maintenance and other areas where there is this hierarchy, and found that this position was already less than those other positions. And so we have adjusted the proposed salary to be more in line with that 15% gap between a superintendent and assistant superintendent. This will help compensate for those additional duties and get this position more on par with the other assistant to superintendent pay positions. That makes sense, but.
So Chip, are you saying that the current salary is the gap between the supervisor and assistant is more than 15%?
Yes, correct. It's more like 20%. And I'm not sure why this is the only one that is like that, but These changes today will help keep it on par with the others.
So my question is about the certificates you just mentioned. Do they currently hold those and not getting paid for them, or have we not done them?
So we have a very motivated staff, and I appreciate them. Matt is great. He has got all these licenses in hand. We are ready to go. We knew this was coming. They have been tracking the regulation for about a year now, and so they got prepared ahead of time, so we appreciate that.
It's required for the certification. Is it a class? Is it demonstrating certain knowledge? What's required?
All of the above. So they have to actually take a class to get the knowledge, and then they actually have to show proficiency on the devices. They actually have to take them apart, clean them, reassemble them, test them, and prove to the proctor that they know what they're doing. And then the cross-connection control specialist is actually a physical test at the state, and you get a certification for that as well.
Thank you.
And it requires ongoing CEUs, and they always have to keep abreast on the latest regulations. You're welcome.
Just to clarify, so the existing assistant water superintendent is taking on these roles, or you're not asking a new headcount?
We're not asking for any change in FTEs. We're adding duties to an existing position.
And then the salary bump to the 15%.
Compensation.
Is there a reason the numbers aren't in here?
They are. They're in the budget. They're in the budget impacts in the staff report.
Okay.
Yes. So the pay goes from 58 to 62 per hour. Overall, in an annual year, that's $8,465.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, they're already doing it.
Yes, sir. Any other input, changes, requests? One other thing I should add is Naomi worked with me on this and sent it to the labor organizations for a check-in, and we haven't heard anything back, so we believe they're fully on board as well.
Questions? Okay. From the public. Public comment on this item, and the change in the water superintendent. Seeing none, for public comment, I'm ready to.
It's a workshop.
Well, I know it's a workshop, but it doesn't, it's not up, down? Oh, okay, well then we're good.
No, we will, bring it back for formal.
Thank you. Thanks. Next workshop item is the lower Cascade Canal and Upper Grass Valley Canal tree health canopy cover and pond monitoring report. Doug will be here with us.
Morning. Good morning, board, staff, members of the public. Doug Roderick, Director of Engineering. We're here today to get a presentation from Stantec with regards to the tree canopy, tree health, and pond.
Monitoring.
Monitoring, thank you. Go blank there. As you remember, as part of the conditions of the approved EIR that was done as part of the Banner Cascade Pipeline Project, the board had agreed to do a 10-year study on two of the canals that we were reducing flows drastically in to see how those reduced flows impacted the local trees, et cetera, along the route of the canal. And depending on the results of the study, whether water replacement development was necessary or not. And after the presentation, I'm sure you guys have already read it already, the recommendation is that we're not going to need to do any water replacement because the overall tree health and pond are doing quite well. So with that, I'll hand it off to Megan. She has a little presentation to give you guys this. And by the way, this is the 10th and final year. So we're done with this after this presentation.
Megan, will you come to the podium? Make sure the microphone can hear you.
Or I can sit here if you're more comfortable.
Okay, I just need the clicker.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Doug. Okay.
Would you turn on her video?
Oh,
yeah.
Megan,
let's push.
Oh.
Right there. Yep. And I think so. Yep.
Okay, great. Okay.
Well, thank you for having me. As Doug said, I'm Megan Oates. I'm a botanist and project manager for this project. I have been working on this project for about the past 8 years, since 2015, which was the second year of monitoring. I'm a Nevada County native, and I have been in the area for most of my life. And today I am presenting the 2023 findings from the long-term canopy cover and pond study for the Lower Cascade Canal, which I refer to as LCC, and the Upper Grass Valley Canals, which I refer to as UGVC, as a part of the Banner Cascade Pipeline Project. This is the final year of monitoring compliance.
Megan, have you been with this project the whole 10 years?
Since 2015, so when I was hired on as Advantage, so almost.
Almost.
Almost, yeah.
It's nice to have the consistency.
Yes, yeah. So today we will be covering the background of this study, going over the study methods used, the results of the 2023 Year 10 study and how that compares over time, and finally a discussion of the overall project and the conclusions made at the final year of monitoring. So as was discussed in 2013, flows in LCC were reduced from approximately 45 to 5 CFS as part of the project, and branching from LCC, flows in the UGVC were reduced from 12 to 1 CFS. And this is a little bit wrong because on April 12th, 2023, so just about a year ago, UGVC was cut off from flows as there are no longer any customers on it. We also utilize DS Canal as our reference site, and flows in DS Canal have continued per normal operating conditions at rates averaging 50 CFS during the summer months and 15 CFS during the winter months. As a part of the Banner Cascade Pipeline Project, NID developed a plan to implement 3 types of long-term ecological monitoring along the LCC and UGVC. Within the project CEQA FEIR, the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program, NID was to develop 2 mitigation measures to monitor for evidence of dewatering impacts to riparian habitats and prepare and implement a mitigation and monitoring program to determine impacts to special status species using adjacent seeps and ponds. The monitoring commitment was to study potential impacts over a 10-year period. In 2013, Stantec developed the 10-year canopy cover study monitoring plan to comply with these mitigation measures. This consisted of the canopy cover study, which included the tree health assessments. Assessment data was to be collected over a period of 10 years at an interval of every 2 years, so for a total of 6 surveys. Surveys were to be conducted in the late summer or fall. The other part of the canopy cover study was the canopy cover assessment. And the canopy cover data was collected every 4 years with one final assessment to conclude the study this past year. Surveys were conducted also in the late summer and fall. Pond data was also collected every 4 years with one final assessment concluding this year. And that happened in the same time frame as the other surveys. And on to study methods. So the study methods for the monitoring over the years assess the impacts from flow reductions through spatial and temporal comparisons. We have applied a mixed method qualitative and quantitative approach for documenting these condition changes over time. To orient everyone on the locations of the study sites, we have this overview figure. As discussed in the background section earlier, the LCC and UGVC canals have reduced flows. The DS Canal, which is located fairly parallel to LCC at a slightly lower elevation, is used as the reference site due to its continued normal operations. On this figure, you can also see where the canopy cover assessment reaches are in dark blue. The tree health assessment sites are as numbered, and there's also the pond sites, but it is very hard to see them at this scale. As noted previously, there are 3 study types created in coordination with the public, the first of which is a tree health assessment. There are a total of 6 sites that have been assessed over the past 10 years, 4 of which are on the LCC, One site is on the UGVC, and one site is the reference on the DS Canal. There are up to 20 trees evaluated at each site. Each study tree is evaluated based on the following criteria, including measuring the growth via the diameter of each tree, assessing the foliage cover and coloration, evaluating bark health, new growth, evidence of disease, parasites, and insect damage. The second study is the canopy cover assessment, which is conducted every 4 years and was just conducted now. The sites for each reading or observation are along the same canal reaches as the tree health assessments, but these sites extend along the entire length of each established reach. These readings are taken with a spherical densiometer. The densiometer measurements are taken at about 1 meter above canal level. The densiometer is kept level by using a bubble level on the corner of the instrument. The mirror reflects the same degree of arc overhead, and the canopy cover above is displayed within the mirror. This utilizes a method of a fixed grid for standardizing measurements. Each canopy of intersection is counted where the canopy cover crosses it. Each observation point includes 4 readings, one facing upstream, one facing downstream, one left bank and right bank. Along the LCC, there is about 7 miles of canal where 273 observation points are. Along the UGVC, there is about a half a mile stretch where there are 27 points. Along the DS Canal, there is about a 1 mile stretch where there are 85 observation points. In total, there are 385 densiometer observation points. The third study is the pond study, which is conducted every 4 years and was conducted this past year. There are 2 ponds along the LCC and 1 pond along the DS Canal that are assessed. For these studies, we conduct wildlife and habitat suitability assessments, and the following data is recorded: a delineation of the inundated area, soil saturation, hydrology patterns, the range of the water depth, the soil types, vegetation present, wildlife species observed, California red-legged frog habitat assessment, and we always take site photographs to compare year to year. This brings us to our results. As noted, all 3 study components were required in 2023, the year 10. Tree health data has been compared every 2 years. Canopy cover assessment and pond studies have been compared every 4 years. The tree health assessment has a variety of components that are evaluated and added together to calculate and quantify the overall tree health. As you can see in this chart, over the years, the overall tree health has consistently stayed in the good category with just slight changes over the years. Site 4 is the only exception, and it is technically in our excellent health category at the baseline and again at this year. The tree health score remains at or above 10 at all sites. There is a temporal year-over-year variation noted. In 2023, tree health improved. It had a bit of a higher score at 2 LCC sites and the DS Canal, where sites along the UGVC and 2 LCC sites remain consistent with previous year's results. This past year, we saw an increase in new growth, overall decrease of insect infestation, and not a lot of disease or parasites present. Additionally, as you can see here, the health scores are similar to those of the baseline conditions, which are the black bars, and this year is the one in the far right, the more auburn colored. Canopy cover assessment, this figure shows roughly each observation point where readings are taken. From year 0 to year 4, average canopy cover density marginally decreased by approximately 7% on the LCC and 6% on the DS Canal reference site. From year 4 to 8, average canopy cover had a greater decrease by approximately 13%, both on the LCC and DS Canals. From year 8 to 10, average canopy cover had quite an increase by approximately 19.8% on LCC and 5.4% on the DS Canal reference site. The UGVC site experiences a very slight increase in percent canopy cover. The UGVC site also has a higher proportion of conifer trees, which likely allows for less abscission, and therefore there's less variability year to year. On this graph, it shows minimum, maximum, and average density of canopy cover. I just kind of like to look at the average, which is the darkest bar is on the farthest right. And due to the fact that there is a similar decrease and increase of canopy covers at the LCC and DS Canal sites, it indicates that there's minor decline, and it's potentially due more to seasonal climate conditions and natural position variation from year to year. During year 10 monitoring, the pond study on the LCC yielded minor change from the previous monitoring years. In the past 10 years, our GPS mapping units have become much more precise as well. So I always say the way these are mapped, I think it just got better and better every year. But visually looking at it, there was not much change to these ponds. And the more important part and why these studies are done is the potential California red-legged frog habitat and other special status species habitat remains consistent over time. This is the DS Canal pond, and it shows a similar result. And that brings us to the discussion. So there's some annual weather variability that can influence the results. Over the past 10 years, tree health remains relatively constant on both a temporal and spatial scale. Site conditions remain relatively consistent to baseline conditions in 2013 and remain in good health per our scale. The tree health and canopy cover trends also mirror that of the reference site. Pond study results indicate little variability in ponded habitat, and the habitat remains consistent for any potential special status species. Last year, 2023, was the final year, year 10, of this monitoring events of the canopy cover assessment and the pond study as a part of the CEQA-required long-term ecological monitoring. The canopy cover and pond studies report provide data and analysis for monitoring year 10, and the data from which are provided in the context of the whole of the monitoring record. So we go back, in the report, we go back to year 0 to show how anything from the baseline to the final year. So this report also satisfies the 10-year summary report and includes final findings. Based on those findings, no additional monitoring or adaptive management actions are recommended for the district. So we now welcome any questions, or if you'd like to contact me in the future, there's my name, Bernadette Beasy, whose name you might recognize, our principal biologist. She can also be contacted.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, comments from board?
I love this study.
I know, I love it.
It's been a fun one.
I think it is so important because we make assumptions about what NID water does to the natural environment around it. And this study shows that, as I'm interpreting it, that the environmental impact of the NID canal water is not enhancing tree health or pond health in any notable way. And I think that is a very important analysis to have been completed, because we hear about how we have to keep the water flowing for the environment and along our canals. And this shows that that's not what keeps that environment healthy. It's nature by itself. So I really commend the study and appreciate the investment the district made to verify this.
Director Beerwagen, comment?
Yes. To bring everyone up to speed, the history of this, these are all dirt canals, correct? And it goes along with Karen, so we have clay soil. We know some water's leaking, but it proves that you can use a dirt canal and not affect the environment. I think I'd also point out this was a requirement at the time that we keep some water in the Cascade and the trail open on that system. So I think it's important to point out that this has been ongoing, addressing all the benefits, not just the water getting out of the canal. So I think that's a good assessment. Thank you.
I have a question, comment maybe. So what I didn't see here, what I think would have been helpful for me was to overlay the rain, or, the climate conditions, whether it was dry, wet.
It is.
Overlay
yeah.
your years of study.
Yeah.
How that could have, or maybe it didn't impact.
In the report, we do outline that. I have like all of the rain reports and the drought years versus the wet years and whatnot. And we actually didn't see too much. If anything, there was a bit of a latent effect in that after a few years of drought, you would see maybe slight decline in tree health. It wasn't an immediate effect. But we've been fortunate enough these past couple of years to have great rain, and this year I would say the trees did seem a bit healthier. Everything rose a little bit more. But yeah, it's more outlined in the report. I didn't want to get into too many details on the, but yeah.
So as you read those trends, I go, oh, those were drought years, oh, those are rain years.
Right. Yep.
The canal is not affecting those as much as the rainfall.
Yep,
but I wonder, I wonder, the rain falls or doesn't fall, and the impacts of that don't, as you said, are not immediate, they're extended. So, the last couple of years we've had wonderful rainfall, and I imagine our tree health is going to continue to improve. And how long does it take to kind of see the impacts from a wet year until you, I guess I'm not articulating it, but
well, no, I
understand that there's a delay.
Yeah, and it would be fascinating to study it more. But as part of like this project and whatnot, we weren't super worried about those kind of.
Understood. I know it was a part of the design.
But, yeah.
And then the last thing is, would this study be transferable to other parts of canals, or would there have to be an independent study for that soil type, that tree cover type, so like I think it's a tar ditch or something?
Right.
So completely different. How much of this is transferable?
I think quite a bit of it would be. I was commenting once the study was done, it would be fascinating to kind of do a white paper we get questions from other, irrigation districts about the same question. It comes up in so many EIRs that, and whatnot. So it would be really fascinating to be able to do a white paper, and that would be able to have more results that are shown, and people can really understand how there's not that much of effect. I don't know, but how much like different canals would be, that transferable,
different elevations too. This is
yeah.
a cooler elevation here than say down in the tar.
Right. So it would, having more studies would be, you'd definitely be able to bolster that. But I think overall, this study just kind of shows with these types of ditches, if you're going to pipe them, if you're going to, drain them or whatnot, that it's not that much of an effect. So yeah, I'd love to do more studies, but yeah, that's where we're at now.
You do that. You get a PhD.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Is there other board comments? Yeah. Okay.
I remember the last time you presented this, it really had a big impact on my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall at the last study, you presented tree mortality in the different sites, and there was actually greater tree mortality in the areas where water were the same flow. Mm-hmm. There was more tree mortality than the areas where there was less flow.
Yeah, and this year what was interesting was at the DS Canal, I'm sure you guys know this, but there was a lot of storm damage.
Yes.
In particular in that area. So it did have a lot of tree deaths in that area, but it was all due to, we could obviously tell it was due to fallen cedar trees on top of the study trees. So yeah, it was kind of interesting. This year at LCCU Site 1, I believe, they were also doing some tree removal, I think for fire. I'm not sure, when I got there, I was like, okay, there's some trees that are missing and have clearly been cut. And so that was also interesting to, we also have to tease apart the tree deaths because they're not necessarily, we don't want to include them in the study because they're not a result of what we're studying. So, but yes, it is kind of interesting that the DS Canal, I think, has seen the most tree deaths. So.
Yeah. Being a workshop, or is there anyone who wants to make a comment or ask a question about this study?
Good question. Comment. Was part of the study studying species that are not native to Nevada County they affected, or did it change or affect non-native species?
Yeah, that was not a part of this study. We did, in the report, like at the end, we take a plant list of the sites. And so there are definitely natives. There are a couple sites where like the English ivy, has gotten pretty thick, but I don't see that as a result of, it hasn't gotten too much more thick than the first year that we studied it. So things like that. It wasn't necessarily a part of the study, but it was something we noted while we were out there.
That's a suggestion. 10-year study that maybe you could transfer to a high school classroom or to a college classroom that they can pick up what you guys left off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right.
Matthew Coulter, Nevada County. Excellent study. I just like to hear that there's ground out there seeing what's going on. And I would request that when we do these types of studies that we look just outside of our focus area to see the impacts from encroachment on the area. So you say, oh, these trees are good, but literally the encroachment, it's a clear cut beyond that. And if we're boots on the ground anyway, it'd be good to go, hey, this is happening here, and not just this narrow little band, because Empire Mine is suffering on every single side from encroachment. And as a state park, you would think that they'd be able to handle it, but they can't. Tree cutting on state park property, dumping on state park property, fires on state park property, and issues like that. But again, if you're out there, boots on the ground, and as well as the access, I was talking about fences. This is a 10-year study. I bet in 10 years you guys have found gates, new fences, new places that you couldn't go that you were just able to go last year that people have blocked. Thank you.
For your comment.
Somebody else is here. I was wondering, I mostly interact with Malta and Ridgeview Drive, where a lot of people walk their dogs. What is the pond there considered? Is that where the grates are over the?
There's a pond. The pond is off of, I can't remember the name of it right now, but there's two actual ponds.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
Don't recall seeing one.
Okay.
And maybe this is totally out of your area, but a few months ago I did see spraying there. And does that have anything to do with you? I'm wondering. If we're still spraying, what are we spraying? That's what I'm wondering. Am I allowed to ask that at this time?
Workshop. I think it's a workshop, so you're in bounds to ask that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody want to answer, Greg?
I don't think we have an answer.
It is on private property.
Yeah, it's private property, it's not our pond.
Oh, it's private property.
Oh, no, I saw NID spray.
Why don't you give us your contact information, and we'll look into it and give you a call.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Anyone else? I don't see anyone online. Okay, and we'll declare this workshop complete. And thank you, everyone. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
It's surprising, really, to me, and I'm happy to see it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Do you guys want to take a break before we launch into this? Yes or no? No. Okay, we're going to push forward then. Ready for the update?
This item is a workshop item with no materials. It is related to the PG&E issue that is currently occurring up at the Spalding 1 powerhouse. As the board is aware, our water and PG&E's water is commingled. There's a bottleneck point, and that is at the Spalding Reservoir. There are two powerhouses at the reservoir. The primary issue that we are waiting for the repair to be completed is on the Spalding 1 powerhouse. The PG&E had originally told us that the repair would be made, well, the date has moved a couple of times. And mind you, it took some time and effort for PG&E to get into the facility, dewater the tunnel, to be able to have full understanding of the extent of the damage. The damage at the Spalding 1 powerhouse essentially boils down to two areas. There are two discharge horns that it's our understanding that those discharge horns are utilized kind of when shutting off the powerhouse, they discharge water out of them. So they're like big, look like a horn, concrete, steel tubes that water goes out of. Both of those discharge horns have failed, as well as there was damage that was experienced to the powerhouse's foundation and some supporting columns. PG&E has recently notified us that they have two options for repair. The first option for repair would not bring both discharge horns back online until August. NID staff has indicated to PG&E that that is not a viable option. Without additional water supply coming into the system, we would be running out of water and be facing significant water shortages. PG&E then did indicate that there is a second option where they could return to, have a partial return to service, and that is now stated to be June 12th. Mind you, the schedule does not have a lot of leeway in it. It's not an exact schedule, and in fact, we requested a critical path schedule that's typically provided and prepared by the contractor, and PG&E has yet to agree to give that schedule to us, so we're still working on that. So the partial return to service on June 12th, as now indicated by PG&E, would allow for around, well, it was 400 CFS going into the horn, which we would be able to take into our reservoir, but there would be some loss. So what Chip's going to review is we have gone through some numbers to understand impacts to water supply and how that gets us through the irrigation season. Just in a Cliff Notes version, because I'm sure people are waiting to hear what that answer is. At this time, if there's a lot of ifs in this, if 400 CFS can actually be delivered through one horn, and if it is returned to service on June 12th, and the weather somewhat, we don't have any drastic weather changes as in a very extreme heat, we do think that we will be able to make it through the season, dropping our reservoirs in Scotts Flat and Rollins, specifically Rollins, very low, with maintaining just the voluntary 20% conservation. So I'm going to have Chip go through those numbers so he can present those to.
Can you give the status on the South Yuba Canal before we go into?
Sure. So there are, maybe I'll just break it down a little bit. So there's essentially what we refer to as 4 issues going on up in that area. There is the Spalding 1 and Spalding 2 powerhouse. The issue I just spoke about is the Spalding 1 powerhouse. The Spalding 2 powerhouse allows PG&E essentially to move water into the powerhouse and into the South Yuba Canal. The South Yuba pipe is the top of the South Yuba Canal. PG&E owns the South Yuba pipe. The South Yuba pipe was damaged sometime in February due to some type of landslide event. It's unclear as to whether it was a rock or what happened, but there was some type of landslide event. PG&E originally indicated that they were working on a repair and that the repair would be done sometime kind of late summer, fall time period. The challenge with that for us is that they would, if the South Yuba pipe was repaired, and there's another issue at the powerhouse as well, and if that issue was repaired, we would be able to put water into the South Yuba Canal, which would then allow us to have water supply going into Scotts Flat. The lead time related to the completion of the repair at the South Yuba pipe was originally indicated to be lead time for materials, specifically the pipe. Would they say it was, Chip, 56-inch pipe? Yes. It's a 56-inch steel pipe. They did make some indication yesterday that they have found a secondary source for pipe and that they may be able to attain that pipe sooner. If they are able to obtain the pipe to repair that section of the South Yuba pipe or South Yuba Canal, that would allow a couple of more options for the district that we have asked for them to explore. One, they could make some temporary modifications or repair the Spalding 2 powerhouse. The temporary modification would consist of the Spalding 2 powerhouse currently has an issue with the wicket gates that are not functioning properly. There is a way for them to pull the runner out of the powerhouse and open up the wicket gates. Repairing the South Yuba pipe would also allow them to potentially pump water over the top of the dam and into the pipe. And so we are pressing very hard on that particular repair, because even on a temporary basis, even if they couldn't install a 56-inch pipe, any amount of water would be helpful. So we have requested that they look at some alternative repair as well, even if it's on a temporary basis.
Would that be a generator pumping the water out of Spalding and into the pipe? Okay.
That would be one option. There is also an issue with their low-level outlet at Spalding too. And this information is noted in their FERC docket. We don't have all of the details due to some of the information being classified as confidential because it is an electrical facility. But it does sound like there is some issues related to the low-level outlet. It sounds like it's isolated to the discharge pipe, but we're not quite clear on what the extent of that issue is. And we have requested clarification on what's going on and what the plan is for repair. And that also would allow water to be able to be transferred. If they're able to repair the low-level outlet, that would also allow water to be transferred into the South Yuba Canal through a repaired South Yuba pipe. So does that help? Okay. So I'm going to have Chip go through the numbers that and I just want to give Chip and Tor and Kian and everybody huge thanks. They have been crunching numbers nonstop, and every time something changes a little bit, we have to do all new numbers. And just so the board and the public are aware, we are looking, we do take a little bit of a conservative approach because the last thing we want to do is run out of water. So we are confident in the numbers, but you have to understand that these are subject to change. That schedule changes by one day. We will be coming back with a different recommendation. So with that, I'm going to have Chip go through the numbers really quick.
So Chris, if you could put up the Rollins version first, please. And like Jennifer said, these are our best guesstimates based on averages, and there has been a ton of work in crunching numbers here. So don't really want to make this a public-facing document all that much. I just want to give you a heads up on where our current calculations are, and they are very subject to change. So right now, what we'll focus on, this is a ton of numbers, and I don't expect everyone to understand it, but we're going to focus on just a couple of things here. If you look at lines 19 through 21, as you scroll across, those are three different elevations that we project Rollins hitting as we move through the summer months. And I think, so the very first one, line 19, is where Rollins will be with very conservative runoff numbers. Line 20 is our average through the year. Line 21 is PG&E's Flexos run. That's their own modeling. So they have a little bit different numbers than we do. The part I want to highlight here is that we would like to be somewhere in this conservative estimate because we want to play it as safe as possible. We don't want to run out. And additionally, we think the conservative is the more appropriate approach given that these canals are not currently wet. They're not leaking. They're not adding any extra runoff into the Bear River or the Deer Creek. So that means our normal leakage and runoff into those facilities is not occurring right now. So we took a more conservative approach.
Chip, can I ask about that?
Yes, sir.
Do you use a year, like 2022 as an example, or did you use a percent of average?
We used average, percent of average, yes.
25 or?
I have to ask Tor, but it's substantially less. We did about, I think it was about 40% of average, but. So the column I think we need to focus on the most here is column N. What you're going to see is that in our most conservative scenario, we run Rollins down to 22,928 acre feet. On its surface, that doesn't sound bad, but we have bathymetry studies that say Rollins has about 12,500 acre foot of sediment in it. That means it's no longer accessible. In addition to that, we have 5,000 acre foot that we need to leave in the reservoir at all times for fish and wildlife regulatory requirements. So when you take 17,500 off of that 22,000 acre feet, we're only left with 5,000 acre feet of spare. That's literally only a few days worth of water. So it is very imperative for us that PG&E does their best to hit this time frame, and that we continue to get the voluntary conservation that we have been seeing.
What rate of voluntary conservation did you take?
There are none. So
this is without the 20%.
Again, we ran this as conservative as possible. We ran it as an average year.
Well, that's a good question, because I was assuming
No, we didn't
Perfect.
want to assume an actual amount for voluntary conservation because of how tight we're also running the system. When you're getting down to 5,000 acre feet, that would be very little
Right.
wiggle room for something to occur.
So I will add to that, though, the response has been good, and we appreciate our customers' efforts. So far, 136 raw water customers have voluntarily reduced 238 miners inches.
Wow.
So the response has been good. We encourage people to keep it up, so we are appreciative there.
Like 5,000 acre feet?
2,500,
25?
yeah.
2,500? Okay.
So, again, this scenario is played out assuming that we get 400 CFS into the Drum Canal on June 12th. We are also forced to take about 50 CFS of that and transfer it into the South Yuba Canal to bolster the Deer Creek side. And Chris, if you want to jump into Scotts Flat, we can talk about that. So Scotts Flat is in a little bit different scenario. There is enough water there to sustain storage-wise, but what we run into is that we can't get the water out of it at such a volume that we won't have to short some canal customers unless we get some water into that canal by that June 12th date. What happens is our demand increases after June 12th. We can't keep up anymore. We'll have to start shorting, folks. That 50 CFS into the South Yuba Canal is critical in that it allows us to not have to run the pumps we'll still be running the pumps at full steam, but we'll have some extra to send down the canal to the customers at the end.
Can I ask a question about June 12th, just to get some confidence? Is June 12th the date we gave them that is like Armageddon Day, or June 12th is the day they came back as we can have the partial fix done?
June 12th is the PG&E's estimated date of back
Without any input from us on where the tipping point is.
Correct. However, we have had ongoing discussions about where we are at in water supply, which is why they are no longer pursuing the two-horn fix anymore.
Sure.
Because we would run dry.
And just to be forthright, we don't have a whole lot of confidence in June 12th.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
No.
Hey, Chip?
Yes.
When, going back to the Rollins discussion, I'm interested if you, and maybe it's on here, I just haven't been able to see it, is how many of our raw water customers essentially are served by the water that's in Rollins, and how many of them are served by the water that's in Scotts Flat? I'm just trying to get a sense of scale of how many folks are going to be, without water in some of these scenarios, and how many will be just cut short. Do you have that information, or?
It is variable, but I just as overall usage goes, volumes to each arm,
right.
The Bear River side of it is about 56% of our water usage. So volume-wise, there's more volume in Placer County than there actually is in Nevada County. Customer-wise, I think the customer count in Nevada County is much higher because there's smaller users, less water purchased.
So when you say 56% of our overall customers?
Of water volume used.
Of water volume used.
Correct.
If I can maybe just.
I'm trying to kind of get to something else.
If I can.
Go ahead, Greg.
Help clarify that. At the beginning of Plan for Water, Chip gave a great presentation on our distribution system below Scotts Flat and below Rollins. Those PowerPoint presentations are now back up on the front side of our website. And so that does show total CFS and number of customers actually within every canal distribution along underneath Scotts Flat and Rollins. So that helps.
Is it true, is this assumption true that the folks that served from the Rollins side will be, or could be, in much worse condition than the folks served from the Scotts Flat side in terms of raw water?
At this point in time, I'd say we're pretty equal.
Okay.
That date's pretty critical for both arms.
Okay.
And while we're on Rollins, there's one thing I forgot to mention, and we didn't talk about recreation, but historically we run Rollins very full throughout the summer months. It's because we're importing a ton of water. That's where the locals are going to see the biggest change, is that we are going to be dropping Rollins quickly and early. So it will be running much lower. We figure by mid to late May, it's gonna be very obvious what's going on, and that's gonna drop down. So just a heads up there.
Well, and I've had, constituents ask, well, hey, I just bought my year pass. What's gonna happen? Do I get my money back? You know, all of those kinds of considerations. So I think, that'll be a further discussion, but
Yeah, and
we're already asking.
Yeah, and we'll keep in touch with that as these numbers update. So again, we haven't really started irrigation season yet, and when we get a couple weeks in, some of these numbers will start to update, and then we'll have a better idea where we're at. We're doing the best we can with the projections, but they are just that. They're projections, they're not solid. So here we are on Scotts Flat Lake, and this is the same scenario where basically the highlighted yellow line on 24, that is the elevation of Scotts Flat Lake as we move through the summer months. And we have two scenarios there. One is average and one is if it's dry. What you can see is that we end in October at 19,190 acre feet in an average situation. In a dry situation, we're at 16,000 acre feet. Just for a reference point, in the 2015 drought was the last time we hit a low point in Scotts Flat, and that was about 18,000 acre feet. So we're right in that same area of where we ended the 2015 drought year. So that gives people a better scenario of where Scotts Flat is projected to be. Again, the problem on the Deer Creek side is not necessarily the storage. That's not a bad number. The challenge will be getting that capacity into the canals and then refilling Scotts Flat in the next year if we're not able to get more imports into it. So that's our current concern.
And then do you have the same similar number about the sediment in Scotts Flat that you gave us for Rollins?
I believe we do have bathymetry studies for Scotts, but it's not near the concern that it is in Rollins.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Oh, I'll bet we got a lot of questions.
I know, I stop and pause and answer if we can.
PWA at the Placer County Ag meeting mentioned that they have at least one pump and maybe two that are out of commission. Any knowledge of?
I had not heard that. I can tell you that we are on a call with PCWA and PG&E twice a week. We have given PCWA these forecasted numbers in Rollins. It actually spells out how much water is available for both agencies. They have taken these numbers and they have indicated that they are going to have to pump out of the American River at a higher capacity than they normally do. To date, they haven't given us any concern that they can turn those on.
Getting them into service, but.
Yeah. So far, they seem to be fairly confident that their pumps will suffice their needs for now.
So can they pump water to subsidize that we would give them?
So remember, PG&E has 10,000 acre feet of storage within Rollins.
Right.
Contractually, essentially, PCWA has rights to half of that, and we have rights to half of that. We've made it clear that NID is going to require all 5,000 acre feet of what we have rights to. So that requires PCWA to maximize their pumping because there will be no water to borrow.
So thank you for that analysis. That's very helpful. One of my big concerns, and I'm sure everyone here shares it, is what 2025 looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering, how are we looking at not just this year, but next year? Obviously, we're going to have to put a lot of hypotheticals in there, but, what approach we take this year is going to affect next year, obviously. And really would like to understand your thinking about that, and can we do a forecast that then shows under a dry scenario what our carry forward balance would be, what a medium scenario, and then a wet year, just so we know what we're talking about.
Yes, thank you for that. We are working on that in the background. We have run the analysis for Scotts Flat. It is one of our bigger concerns for refill. It's a very small watershed. It relies very heavily on the imports from the South Yuba Canal. Keep in mind, we talked earlier about 2 horns. One horn's being fixed now, but that means the second horn needs to be fixed potentially in the middle of winter. We are hopefully stressing that we will need some flows reestablished in that South Yuba Canal through the winter months for us to be able to refill Scott's, and we are continuing to request that be completed before the second horn moves forward. But worst case scenario, Scott's won't refill. It'll get fairly close, but if it's a dry year, I would expect without adequate imports, we'll be 3 to 4 feet off of full.
So do they typically not run water in the wintertime in the south of the canal?
It's very, very limited because of storm events and whatnot. They cut the flows generally to about 35 CFS. The summer months, it's 75, so you can see it's a pretty substantial cut. But being that we own the facility, the lower section of the facility now, we're going to do the best we can to run it to its maximum capacity to get that refilled.
Whether they were, as part of their management, not to discharge water out of small, some other reason, operational.
It'll be related to the repair of the horns.
Not to the generation of electricity.
No. They'll have to have another outage to repair the second horn.
Right.
So we are requesting that the South Yuba pipe be repaired before the second horn goes off.
And likewise in Rollins is a little more robust system, very flashy. Generally speaking, it fills every year. It did so even during the drought. So we have a little less concern for refill in that arm, but still we are limited on imports, so we'll have to keep an eye on it. Also keep in mind that our Bowman and our Jackson Meadows are holding a ton of water. We can't move it across. So we will lean on that as well.
Okay, that's good. We talked at our previous meeting about what a mandatory water program would look like. And I'm wondering, in connection with that, when do we think we're going to have a reliable projection from PG&E as to when this repair is going to take place? Because, as we march through the season, the benefits of being able to take a harder stance on conservation becomes more limited. And so I'm wondering, at some point, will PG&E give us a schedule that we feel,
You can rely on.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, there's a couple of items. I have requested a more thorough schedule several times, and I have not stopped with that request. So I'm hoping that request is filled in the very near term. The second item is it is emergency work in a very tight location, and it is often the case that things go wrong with those types of projects. And the schedule that they have built, my understanding from what PG&E has indicated to me, is that there is not a lot of fluff, extra time built into the schedule. So for example, we had last week, we're told that the return to service date would be June 8th, and then that return to service date has now moved to June 12th, and that was related to a snowstorm event that occurred last week in that particular area. So weather could impact the schedule, materials, they're working in a very tight space. I will have more confidence once we receive a more detailed schedule prepared by the contractor. Until such time, or if there are any other schedule delays, staff is comfortable with a voluntary conservation mandate as opposed to a mandatory conservation mandate. But keep in mind, as Chip just showed, the projections on end-of-year storage are very, very tight. Even just a 1-week schedule slip could put us into a different situation. So we will continue to bring updates every board meeting back to the board as the situation's going on, and then we will continue to fill you in between those board meetings.
One of the other things that I drew from our last conversation on this is that our ability to actually implement a mandatory conservation program is extremely difficult, given just the layout of our canals and
the way the
Or-
system operates. There would be two options. One would be to go on some type of canal rotation, and one would be to reorifice boxes. Reorificing that many boxes in short order would be extremely time-consuming and costly. Going on a canal rotation would allow for some additional flexibility and not to do such drastic rotations. You know, when it cut, you wouldn't have to do half on, half off if you didn't need it. You could do something less. It is likely that depending on the pumping situation and natural inflows coming in on the Scott side, we could be in a position of needing to have some type of more extensive conservation on the Tar Canal due to canal capacity limitations. And so one of the items that Chip and I have been talking about is meeting with the folks out there to better understand what would be most helpful for them, especially if we had to go to canal rotation. So we are carefully taking consideration with keeping in mind that our number one goal is to impact the customer the least as possible. So if we were to go to some type of, or recommend some type of mandatory conservation, we'll certainly bring options back to the board.
I appreciate you guys' flexibility so far, down our way. We have customers that need water at certain times. So it's really hard for them to say, okay, well, I'll give you 20% back if they don't know that that's coming. And you guys have been really flexible at committing to demand water for a couple rice growers. And at the Ag Commission meeting, you know, there was an ask for, hey, can you cut me off at September 15th? So we could figure out a way to do that without the risk of not being connected next year. That you would probably get some more savings.
And we could absolutely do that. They can do that, so we'll communicate.
I asked her to call, him, Dan. I asked Dan to call Aurora and talk to her.
Sure.
I appreciate that. Just a little refresher, it is in the resolution from last board meeting that, yes, due to the emergency circumstance, anybody who foregoes does not lose their priority or place in line for next year.
Yeah.
So by all means, please conserve as much as possible. We'll keep you in mind for next year. We'll put you right back where you were.
We did this kind of stuff in 1977.
Yes.
It was phenomenal for us, how it worked.
Also phenomenal how low those reservoirs got.
Oh, it was. It worked really good.
Can you tell me why there is so much higher flows in the Yuba River right now, and how that relates to what's happening?
Sure. So generally speaking, Spalding Reservoir runs water through the powerhouses and discharges them into the Bear River watershed. So the Bear River watershed benefits quite substantially from those imports out of the South Yuba River. With both of those powerhouses offline and the low-level outlet not accessible, there's nowhere else for that water to go but to spill over the natural spillway at Spalding and go into the South Yuba River and down.
Okay, there we go.
Additionally, PG&E has Lake Fordyce up above Spalding, and they have a project they're going to work on this year at Fordyce, which means they have to drop that one down as well. And there's nowhere else for that water to go but into Spalding and then spill over the spillway down the South Yuba River. So we would expect the flows in the South Yuba River to be higher and higher longer than historically has been.
Has anyone given, I'm sure we've all given thought, but consideration to the effects, the environmental effects on fish and wildlife in the Bear system and the Deer Creek system?
So yes, we do have in-stream flow requirements on both of those reaches, and we have all intentions of meeting all those in-stream flow requirements. We're not going to shortchange the flows in the river. I will say from Rollins to Combi, the flows will be virtually what has been seen in the past because most of the flows in the river at that time are customer demands. Below Combi, we have a 5 CFS in-stream flow release. We will meet that. It will be the same as we have done every year. On Deer Creek Arm, we have a in-stream flow requirement above Scotts Flat Lake that is dictated upon the South Yuba Canal being available. Right now, it's not available, so we are not obligated to put that in-stream flow in. However, I will tell you, there is some water passing, there's some leakage, there's some valves that leak. So the Deer Creek above Scotts Flat is still wet and will remain so throughout this.
Is it appropriate for someone to comment on how, accessible and, how accessible PG&E has been to our staff and, how helpful they're being to us?
We did submit a letter to PG&E. We are requesting additional information. We do feel that there are some information gaps that we currently have as to the actual schedule and the actual repair itself, the plans for the repair of the other facilities. So we have requested a number of items, and we are hoping to receive a response in that information in the very short term. As the board is aware, and you can tell from the conversation with Chip this afternoon, that information is imperative. We're entering into irrigation season, and if that schedule slips by any more, we could have to take some more drastic measures. And there's a lot of coordination that would have to be completed with other entities in the counties to minimize impacts associated with fire concerns and agricultural economic impacts. And, how do you get a whole community through an emergency such as this? So we are full court press. We are asking for information. We're not giving up. We are encouraging our colleagues to be more forthright and open with information, so we hope that they agree to do so.
Has PG&E allowed us to come up there and inspect and take a look at what's actually happening?
To date, they've only allowed one staff member to inspect the location. The one staff member did go up on Monday of this week. I have requested additional staff member. I requested for 5 staff members to attend. They have only allowed 3 staff members to come, and we're trying to schedule that for next week.
So first off, great job reaching out to all the electeds. I know most of them, if not all of them, wrote letters, and down in Placer County, all the supervisors got together. I assume something similar up here.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we at with OES and FEMA? Are they going to try to push something to help, the growers?
Currently, some of the growers have access to different insurance programs, and specifically the ones that I hear are taking advantage of that are the rice farmers, because everybody will recall, we have some rice farmers, PCWA has some rice farmers, but South Southern Water District has a lot of rice farmers. This situation also impacts South Southern Water District because we are sending less water down the system, so they will receive less water into Camp Far West. We did have a meeting yesterday morning with Nevada County, as well as Placer County OES has reached out, and we're starting to have those conversations as when is it appropriate to declare a local emergency. And I think our thought is it is appropriate if we go to mandatory conservation because of the potential economic impacts associated with damage to crops, golf courses, landscaping, private homes. So we will keep the board apprised of that, but I think that if it goes to mandatory conservation, then we would start working with our county and city partners to start declaring local emergencies.
Is there a drop dead date for declaring, like if PG&E pushes this to, it's going to be now June 30th? Is that going to cause us to, I'm just wondering where those dates are for us.
We did come up with a drop dead date, and mind you, the calculations that we are running are very dependent on actual water use and actual water coming into the system, which is directly correlated to the weather. So that is why Chip and Tor are updating the numbers minimum of once a week.
Fix actually gives us.
Right. So we keep every week we're updating the numbers. Every time something changes, we update the numbers.
Right.
So it's difficult to tell with certainty and say, well, if they moved it out to June 19th, we'd have to go to mandatory, because if this spring is really cool and people aren't using that much water, we receive a couple more storms, we may be okay. If all of a sudden, the storm door closes and we enter straight into 100-degree weather, we would have a problem earlier. So that's why I'm hesitant to say, but any schedule change at all will have detrimental impacts.
I was wondering, Josh, do you have anything you wanted to add to to any sort of emergency declaration that you might see coming?
Hi, good morning, Josh Hunsinger, Placer County Agricultural Commissioner. No, I think the approach we're taking right now is just waiting almost day by day and keeping an eye on the situation. It's really hard to say. I'll take this moment to thank Ms. Hanson, Mr. Jones, Director Calder, Director Holm for just really communicating well and making sure the agricultural community of Placer County is really been kept apprised of the situation, and the communications have been really great. I think, at our Agricultural Commission meeting on Monday, Mr. Jones did a great job of kind of walking through some of the dynamics that are different from a typical drought situation in which we're hitting the spring really dry already, where in this situation, this is a little bit different in that the, we're
saturated,
like pasture and stuff. We've got nice soil moisture. We're in a pretty, good situation just weather-wise, and coming out of winter is a little different from a typical drought here. So, I appreciate the communication. I think that day by day. Perfect.
Day by day. More comments from the audience or from, folks online? If you're online and you want to comment, if you just give me 1 second, please either raise your hand or do *9, and then we can call upon you if you want to have a statement or a question answered.
Al Wolf here. I lived in Sacramento. The San Juan Water District subsidized people getting water-efficient toilets. That's one way. Also, you have a big emergency water source. When I took geology at the University, the Sierras, in fact, I have a book at home of geology of this area that I got at one of your used bookstores, shows how fractured the geology is. In those mines down there, when you have 350 miles of tunnels, some of them are 7 feet wide and 9 feet high. The technology we use in the Navy to purify water for our reactors was 2 parts per billion. You couldn't even taste it. That same technology could be used as emergency water draw from those mine tunnels for your emergency backup water source. I mean, to me, it's not very smart to leave that down there doing nothing when you need water up here and you have the technology to clean it up. You know what Phoenix is doing? Phoenix is building, with the Israelis' help, they're building a desal plant on the Sea of Cortez and building a 200-mile pipeline to Phoenix so they can continue to have urban growth.
I know.
And, the British lost 2 major ships overseas because they did not have distilling units on them. That was for the Prince of Wales and the Repulse to the Japanese. Of course, they didn't have any air cover, but those ships were designed for operation in the North Sea where they could always pull in for water, but they didn't have desal units on, so their maneuverability was limited, and they were sunk by the Japanese bombing them from aircraft, And I'm very familiar with the technology for desal. In Monterey County, what they've done, they've drilled wells in the sand of the beach and used that as the first stage of filtration for their desal facility. I mean, there's so many technologies available. You got to spend money. Otherwise, when I came back from the Navy, I told the city of Sacramento, you better buy oceanfront footage because eventually you're going to need water from the ocean. I mean, there's 1,200 miles of shoreline in California, and there's only a couple desal plants on it. That's ridiculous from what I saw. And nuclear energy is the most efficient way to go to generate power for those desal units. And of course, they're gonna. When I was on the High-Speed Rail Commission for SMUD, that is a weak link in the building of high-speed rail in California. And I pointed it out to them. They have to have separate power plants. Otherwise, that system's not going to work. They can't lean on PG&E. My grandfather was one of the first major stockholders of PG&E in the 30s, Paul Van Driesch. But as soon as they had San Bruno, we sold it. We sold all the stock because they weren't maintaining their system. They were trying to squeeze a nickel too much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions?
You do have one online when you're ready for that.
Oh, we do have one online. Okay, good. Go ahead, Mike.
I have Michael Taylor. I have a couple questions that I haven't heard answered yet. Will Lake of the Pines or Lake Wildwood be affected?
In regards to the lakes in the
lake
subdivision,
levels over the summer.
they are water purchasers, and we generally coordinate with them on situations such as this and ask for conservation, but they have the potential to buy water to keep their reservoirs But
the standard flow coming in, from normal flow coming in, would not maintain their lake levels.
So they maintain their lake levels through purchases from NID. Those purchases are still available, however, we're asking for conservation.
And this is kind of a stupid question. Evaporation rates, have those been calculated in?
That is a variable that is hard to determine as we do this forecasting. There is some level of it in there, but again, it's all variable based on the kind of summer we get.
It's my understanding, talking to some old timers, that there are abandoned canals or canals not in use in the upper systems. And is there a mitigated? Are we looking at an event of total catastrophe that someday we would be able to have a secondary plan put in place with some of those older canals that are not in use?
So great question. The problem with the location of Spalding and us rotating our water through Spalding, it really only avails us to move water across the Yuba River Canyon in one spot, and that's this choke point. We are studying other alternatives and how we can get around Spalding, but they are very long-term, very expensive projects.
But there are some abandoned canals that could allow for that.
The abandoned facilities that used to be up there are no longer usable.
Greenhorn, Bear River are going to maintain minimum flows for environment. And the other question I would have, how come a representative from PG&E hasn't been invited to come be present to answer questions for you guys or the general public?
To date, we do meet with PG&E twice a week. We can invite a PG&E representative if you would like. I just recently met with them again yesterday morning. It's been some long days, a long time ago. So if the board would like to do that, I'd be happy to invite them.
I wonder if they would show up.
I am sure I could encourage them to.
I actually forget the gentleman. There is one for this area that makes himself available, and I can't remember his name, but it would be nice for the public to have.
There is a local representative that is a representative or liaison to the municipalities and counties. So the cities and counties, not technically ours. We deal directly with hydropower stuff, but I'm happy to reach out if the board so desires to have a PG&E representative here.
Interesting. I like that idea.
Okay, we can think about it and talk about it more.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this whole thing, when you went through 4 major issues with PG&E infrastructure, one of which is nature causing the problem, 3 others for which they are fully responsible for. I mean, the level of negligence, and it sounds like this was foreseeable, at least to a degree, if they'd have been inspecting their facilities
and maintaining.
Yeah, and I mean, to have the level of problems that is culminated in this event it's just atrocious and astounding.
And that's the purpose of the recent information request, is to understand to the extent that these situations or maintenance issues could have been prevented in some manner.
Right.
So we'll have to report back on that.
I think it's reasonable to have somebody here at every board meeting and tell the fixes.
I agree,
To give a quick report and field questions from the public.
Right. I agree.
We can do that. I'll ask.
What do you think, Chris?
That's a good idea.
Yes. Okay, we got 4 thumbs up. Okay.
Last but not least, what is the drop dead point that somebody is going to go to the state or the counties and it's going to be a disaster, so that insurances kick in, And I think a state of an emergency for the county or two counties that this is affecting would benefit the general public in getting compensation for, or even the counties, compensation for loss of recreation or loss of,
Well, that's why, Jennifer has been meeting with the county officials and OES and, everybody has been risen up and is involved now, I think. We could say that with confidence, right?
Yeah, it's a topic that's constantly revisited. Our school of thought right now is if mandatory conservation is required.
Yeah, so that was.
I think just the question specifically is what point is it bad enough that if there is a state of emergency either at a county level or
I asked that same question, and so.
When mandatory conservation is required.
So, okay, at the point of mandatory.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great. You know what, if we could get, we have.
Let's go to the.
Yeah, to Aaron Zeitler-Mann, if you want to unmute and give us your comment, please. Sorry, Debbie, hang on a second.
Okay, I can hear Aaron Zeitler-Mann from Circle. I wanted to clarify a couple of things that I thought I heard, and then I've got a question about flows in the South Yuba at the end. It sounds like reservoir levels will be lower in Rollins and Comby than we would expect because we can't do the refill, or there's not the infrastructure capacity to do the refill, but in-stream flows anticipate being met. So I don't know, we'll start there. Am I getting that correct?
Let Chip answer.
You're correct. Reservoir elevations will drop mainly at Rollins. Comby will remain full. It's a diversion facility. And yes, in-stream flows will be met.
So, okay, perfect. That spurs a second question, but we'll keep pushing forward and come back to it. Then around flows in the South Yuba, I didn't realize they had more construction at Fordyce planned as well, which is, I'm sure just makes this even that much more complex. Do you have a sense at all based on current snow water equivalent and the, crystal ball of how quickly it's going to warm up in terms of how long we expect elevated flows? Like I'm thinking about last year, and from a messaging standpoint, should we just be saying, listen, it's a natural hydrograph, like it's going to be like last year? And then I think a lot about the diurnal that people aren't used to seeing, where it's low when you get to the river and then you cross and go over a hike, and then there's another couple hundred CFS and you can't get back. Are you anticipating any of that kind of hydrology going forward?
Well, I'll start at the beginning with the snow survey analysis. We did do our recent snow survey in April. We found our snowpack to be about 102% of average. So I would anticipate the runoff in all other reaches being typical to what you see in an average year. The exception on the South Yuba River is, again, as we mentioned earlier, will be a little bit higher due to the passing of water in Spalding and from Fordyce. And I really can't forecast that. I direct you to PG&E on that one because they're doing the operations there. I'll just say it's going to be a little higher than average and extended a little bit longer, I think, is one takeaway. The volumes, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And, unless we get a, 70-degree rain on snow or something like that, and then maybe it spikes and then it all drops off until they can get control of it. Okay. So then that's great. Thank you. Again, trying to think about how we can be communicating what to expect. Have you done, or is there conversation about water temperature and the rate at which reservoirs warm? I remember I was looking at the Excel sheet, and I'm not able to convert sort of acre feet and those numbers into water surface, but like by and large, deep reservoir, large surface area is going to warm more slowly than, a shallower reservoir. Is there a concern or thought or conversation around water temperature warming faster, or algae blooms, like other things that we need to be thinking about? Like all of a sudden there's toxic algae blooms. The algae is everywhere, but if it's warmer and flows are lower, are some of those kind of concerns something that maybe we're thinking about sooner than we're used to?
Yeah, I do appreciate that comment. Water quality is a concern for us, not only for water temperature, but as these reservoirs drop, there is a potential for some scouring when we get down to elevations we haven't seen in many, many years. So we're keeping abreast on that. We're preparing our treatment facilities for additional turbidities and temperatures. Definitely a concern. I will say, however, if we're able to get, 350, 400 CFS back into Rollins and maybe 50 into Scotts, we do think that's enough to pass through the reservoir to at least keep the health of that reservoir as we move into, August and September.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it. And yeah, big issue. So certainly, if there are messaging opportunities, conversations, messages that we can post, information, that kind of thing, definitely, feel free to reach out. I very much think of this as like community versus a problem kind of thing. So I'm trying to think about all eventualities, not looking to, find challenges or ways to apply pressure.
We appreciate that, Aaron.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that it, Aaron? I'm going to go now to Debbie. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Debbie Tutunchi, Nevada County Farm Bureau. First, great appreciation for all the work your team is doing, the great staff. Also, my sympathies to the staff when you have to re-crunch numbers almost on a daily basis. One of the questions I got at my office that I didn't feel secure answering is the fire hydrant system, especially in Ricky's district. Is there any possibility that the pressures would be too low on the fire hydrant system due to water, or does that come straight out of the treatment plant?
Yeah, all the fire hydrants are supplied by our drinking water system, and there should be no change in volume or availability on those fire hydrants.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Brad?
Hey, thank you, board and staff. Seems like the last couple of years unprecedented, has been overused, but an exciting time for NID. I'm sorry, I'm Brad Fowler, Grass Valley. And I just have two comments. If we come to mandatory conservation, agriculture needs to know as soon, and you guys already know this, but I have to reiterate it, as soon as possible. We're talking about not annual crops, but crops that we have multiple years invested in that I need to make business decisions now. I've fielded 20 calls over the last 2-3 days about, hey, should I ship cows to Oregon? What can I do? And it's interesting that we're in a terrific water year, right? An above average water year. And then we're talking about this micro local drought, which just kind of underscores, that brings me to my second point, underscores the need for resiliency and additional storage or something in this district. That's what I got. So let's continue to explore other options for the future, for when other unprecedented things happen with water supply in this district. Thank you. Thanks for watching out for agriculture, and let us know as soon as you can.
And we have been passing that message to PG&E. We have made it extremely clear. The second they know a schedule slips, we need to be informed.
Right.
Good morning, board. My name is Diana Gamza, and I'm the executive director of the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance, and want to express my gratitude to your staff, to all of your board. This is a very high-pressure situation, and clearly we're not getting all the information that you all need to make the right decision. So thank you for all of your transparency with the public. The Nevada County cannabis industry represents about 160 small farms. Our farmers are producing, on average, about a quarter acre or less of cannabis, and in total, the total canopy of talking about the licensed industry here. The total canopy of our licensed industry is about 28 acres. The economic impact of these 28 acres is about a third of the value of all agriculture assets in Nevada County, and that's per the last crop report. So we just want to come to you today, know that we are your partners in disseminating information to our cannabis farmers. We too have been getting a lot of calls from our industry about some of the impacts, ways that they can help support, what information we need. And so I totally agree with what the previous speaker said, Brad, that it is more important than ever that we look at alternative options as it relates to being resilient for the future, because this was, of course, totally unexpected. You know, we have the droughts, which sometimes we can predict or look at mapping, but we need to really look at solutions for resiliency. So just please reach out to us as next steps emerge. And thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Shirley?
Shirley Ellis. Can you hear me? Shirley Ellis again. I've really been out of local stuff, and I just heard about this last night at the city council, and I'm like, has stuff gone out to regular people? Like, I'm not a farmer, I'm just a person. Has stuff gone out already?
Yeah, there's been news releases, there's been items in the UBNet, there's information on our website, we've done direct mailers to all of our raw water users.
So residential people haven't gotten anything in the mail?
Yeah, I'm not sure what area you live in, but we did not send direct notices to treated water customers.
Okay.
I will say that the city of Grass Valley, City of Nevada City are working on their resolutions as we speak, so they will be notifying their treated water customer base.
Okay.
I believe that might be.
I'm outside the city, but
Okay.
anyway, good to know. I've been more into the national and international scene, and I'm like, oops, what's going on here in Grass Valley? Anyway, I did have a question about for terms of a residential person, what does mandatory mean? Are you going to turn the water off at certain times, charge more money?
No, so typically mandatory conservation on a treated water system is associated with a set of rules. For example, we would require only outdoor watering 2 times a week, no washing of hard surfaces, no car washing, those types of things.
Okay, if you have any ideas on how we get a 12-year-old to cut down their shower time, let me know.
I don't, but if anyone has one, I have a 13.
Hot water off. Yeah, I was going.
Turn the water heater off.
Water heater off, that's a good one. I will try that out and report back.
On demand is a problem, because it just keeps going and going. Right out.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for your comment.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Bruno Piton. I'm Cooperative Extension Advisor in Environmental Horticulture. And I just want to let you know that, Cooperative Extension is here to help however we can. We have the Master Gardeners, so we can do drought workshops, that kind of thing. So, yeah, let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Matthew Goldberg, Nevada County. And none of you guys are aware, but I'd just like to reiterate, 1994, we had a fire, the Toronto fire in Rough and Ready. Nevada County sued PG&E in 1997. At that point, we became a pariah to PG&E, and the last on the list for any repairs, any maintenance, anything. That's the way it is. Look at the telephone pole that I've asked for 10 years to be replaced at the front corner of your property that feeds this whole facility. I could probably push it over, and I'm weak.
We would absolutely not do that.
Exactly. Some driver probably will, and then everything becomes an emergency. So like when the drought was happening, I asked you guys, well, why not educate the people while we're in the drought to conserve and continue to conserve? Nope, drought's over, everyone uses water. At the city council in Grass Valley meeting last night, the 2 highest concerns were by the city council people filling their swimming pools and their lawns going brown. Okay? So that's the mentality that we have going on. Me, me, me. I'm not going to be able to wash my driveway. My concerns are the amount of dust that's going to come off the reservoirs when they're empty, with all this toxic mining crap that's in the bottom of them and very fine materials. Del Webb Golf Course, will they continue to get their full allotment? And at what point do we sue PG&E? Because when I met the new county council for the county of Nevada, my first thing I said to her is, she put up my hand and said, hi, I'm Matthew Coulter, we need to sue PG&E. Because we are literally the last in line. So if you expect them to do anything for us, you're really way off base. Because that little infrastructure up there doesn't make enough money for them to really worry about. So they're not worrying about Nevada County. If they can punish us and make us suffer, they'll drink their $900 bottles of wine and fly around their helicopters above us and spit on us. That's PG&E in Nevada County, where they were born, raised, and became road children. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I'd like to add one more thing. So, got some results that we published in regards to drought regulations and watering in, neighborhoods and such. And what we found is that the regulations did help, but what really helped, this was during the drought from 2012 to 2015, what really helped was actually getting this information out, which it sounds like is being done, and people started conserving before regulations even happened.
Right.
So you guys are all on the right track, and keep doing that again.
Okay, thank you. You have further comments? Anyone else online? Seeing none, any further board comments?
Yeah, one.
Just like to thank everyone for showing up. Appreciate you guys coming here and showing interest and being informed and helping.
Well, I have one other comment, and that is for everyone here and online and everybody you know. I'm a political person in some ways, and I really think that we need to keep the pressure on PG&E, whether we are their stepchild or not. If we have a systemized, letter writer campaign, your representatives, and just keep that pressure on them, that I believe will also be helpful. We don't want them to be able to make us their stepchild and not allow NID, access and be forthcoming. We want them to be truthful, upfront, transparent, and be part of the solution. And I think that can be better achieved by having our public, our Farm Bureau, our farm advisors, everybody get together and really put some pressure on them. So that's my final comment. Okay.
So we will be bringing forth an item every board meeting, as well as I will be reaching out to PG&E to pass on the request to have a representative from them here as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Your slides, Chip, to the board, the slides
Yeah,
you showed about the
Excel spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'd rather not share those. They are movable target.
Oh, got it.
And we are calculating them daily. So at this point in time, they're draft. We will keep you updated as to if those targets are moving. That's kind of where I'm comfortable with.
But if you're speaking to a group, we can provide you that data, that day.
We can get you the numbers, the end.
So if they're just changing every single day, the second we give you the spreadsheet, it's gonna be out of date.
Wrong, yeah.
There's so much information there that you make your head spin because of all the numbers. It's easier for us just to give you an end number if that.
Right, a summary or
Okay,
something, yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll move on to General Manager's report. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate it.
I don't have a whole lot for you. Been a little busy lately with something else. But the rest of the district's going great.
That's good to hear. Thank God.
Well, yeah. I probably just jinxed stuff, so.
Okay. With that, do we have Board of Directors reports? Trevor, shall we start with you?
Sure. I attended the Placer County Ag Commission on Monday, and as well the Placer County Farm Bureau, and you can imagine water was top of mind. So I appreciate both groups. I assume Nevada County Farm Bureau, as well as everyone's all on board trying to put some leverage on. I will bring up something that a couple of the speakers mentioned. Storage in the lower division here, even without any new net water, would help us in this specific situation. Something below that choke point that we talk about. It's something I hadn't really thought of prior, but when the modeling folks were here, I asked them, in their opinion, if this would have helped us get through a situation like this and would in the future, and they said yes. So it's something we should consider as a value beyond just net new storage. Locality. Good.
Thank you. Karen?
I attended the Placer County Farm Bureau meeting a week ago.
Okay. Director Beerwagon?
Yes, I attended the Nevada County Agriculture Commission meeting. Nothing to report from that. She did a great job again, presenting all these facts. And then the Nevada County Farm Bureau meeting last week. Just one, and they asked, so the assistant director, the assistant manager at the fair is also on the Farm Bureau board, and she brought up some changes they're gonna make to the ag experience area and asked why NID is not in there. I said, well, we're gonna bring that one back up, so, that's my goal for the summer, is to see if we can, create some presence, where your water comes from, how it gets to you.
At the fair, you're talking about?
At the fair, yeah.
Yeah, at the fair.
That's it.
And for me, I have been fielding many calls with regard to this situation. I've been utilizing a lot of social media to help inform folks, and the last count, I had over 4,000 views of this. So I feel like for those who want to say, can you get the word out? Over 4,000 views on a social media post is pretty good. I was pretty surprised. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to continue to raise awareness and elevate this to make sure we have everybody's attention. Okay, with that, if there's any further comment about anything? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.